Thanks for being here. Thanks for letting me do this, Dave. Thanks for the invitation. I'm excited about getting to do this. I have spent a lot of time thinking and studying and having a lot of conversations about this topic. It's really written for pastors because that's really my niche. But I think the principles, it's so encouraging, Dave, to hear you say that I hope that they would be applicable to anybody anywhere. So, here's how this came to me, or how I bumped into this idea. Really, it's a myth that I bumped into. 2011, I got a phone call to go change jobs. I was in student ministry a lot, so I really am more fit for student ministry. I've got an immaturity of about a ninth grader, and so that really is more of my vein. But I got this phone call from Andy Stanley, who I really do. I put that in the thing, Dave, that I think he's the greatest leader on planet Earth. He asked me to say that wherever I go, so that's why I say that. But he really is a fantastic leader, and in our world, he's well respected, but he's very approachable and humble, and just a great guy to work for. He calls me and says, "Hey, I'd like for you to change jobs." So I was the high school director at our Alpharetta campus, which is our original campus. A lot of people say, "Oh, the main campus." We try not to say main. I don't know if you have multiple children. You probably don't have a main child. You probably love them all the same, I would imagine. Same thing for us in regards to our campuses. We have 6 Atlanta area campuses, and they really function like churches. So I know Church of the Highlands is a huge deal in Birmingham, as it should be, and very similar to Church of the Highlands in the way that we operate. So we have a central organization, but then we have 6 campuses. And I was at our original campus running high school, doing high school ministry. He says, "Hey, I want you to go move to this other campus called Brownsbridge, it's probably 40 miles north of Atlanta. So it's about as far as you can go outside of Atlanta and still tell somebody that you live in Atlanta." And he said, "I want you to go and be the campus pastor of this campus." So it's about 6,000 people on a Sunday, 50 staff, and a budget of about $8 million. And so for me, I was 29 years old, so that was a pretty significant move for me. I feel every day humbled that God would entrust me with a small little checking account, let alone an $8 million budget. I don't feel like I have enough wisdom to be able to handle that. So I was quite intimidated. But I think I was, all the eagerness that I had was to be in charge. Everybody wants to be in charge. When you're a kid, you look at the people in charge and you think, well, they're the ones that get to do stuff. They're the ones that get to make the call and make stuff happen. I mean, you think about your parents are that way. You know, your parents, from a young child, they have all of the authority and therefore they are the leader. The bus driver at school, on the way to school, he or she controls the bus, can tell everyone to shut up and sit down, tells people when they can get off and not get off. Your teachers in school, they can tell you when you can and cannot use the restroom, which is remarkable. They control all, they have all the power, they have all the leadership because they have the authority. And so you grow up just naturally believing this lie, I have found, that to have influence, you have to have authority. And so that's what I just thought. I thought, okay, well, this is great because I'm moving into this. Brownsbridge has this building, fantastic building, 50 staff, $8 million. I thought, okay, I'm going to finally be able to do what I'm going to be able to exercise some leadership here. And I quickly realized that I wasn't really in charge. I have multiple bosses even today. So if you have a plurality of bosses, this is for you. If you don't, if you are the key leader for your organization, what I've found is that great leaders lead like they're not in charge even when they are in charge. So if you're having to use your authority to exercise influence, then I don't think that's the best way to lead. I think the best way to lead is to lead like you're in charge or not in charge, whether you are not in charge. So that's what I've soon discovered. I shop at Publix. I don't know, were any Publix fans in the room? Shopping is a genuine pleasure at Publix. So at our Publix, we've got these carts. My kids love to go, and it's one of my fatherly roles is I get them out of the house when my wife is about to kill one of them and take them to Publix, and I'll put them in that cart. It's got the steering wheel on it. You familiar with this? And they love it because it feels like a car. It feels like they're in the driver's seat. And so they'll be turning the wheel, and it will or will not go down one of the aisles. But typically around the candy aisle, they'll be turning it, and I'll just keep moving the cart straight. And they look at me with this completely dejected, frustrated look, like you have lied to me, you fooled me. You gave me the steering wheel, and it doesn't work. And that's honestly the way I sometimes feel like it works, at least in my world, in our organization. Somebody hands you a steering wheel, and after about a year of saying, hey, I think we ought to do this, this is going to be exciting, and then somebody from above saying, no, you're not going to do that. Or, hey, I think we're going to try this. No, you're actually not going to try that. I realize, you've given me the steering wheel, but it doesn't work. Have you ever felt that way? Like maybe you manage a team, maybe you manage a department, maybe you manage an organization, and you feel like someone has given you the steering wheel, but because you're not in charge, you feel like it doesn't work. And so what I think I'm trying to learn, I'm having to learn, is that the steering wheel does work, but it operates on different principles. And if we can understand how leadership really works, how influence is really cultivated, then I really believe, I genuinely believe this, I tell our team this all the time, I think that if you understand the way influence works, that influence is really separated from authority, that you can have influence despite authority. You can have influence in spite of authority. You can have influence with authority, without authority. You can have influence with the corner office or without it. That I think you can be dropped into an organization, and I think you can affect change whether you're an intern, whether you're a middle manager, whether you're a C-level executive. Because I really believe the principles of leadership, the principles of influence, which is really what leadership is, they work whether you have authority or whether you don't. So when I begin to realize, okay, so I'm not in charge, this is frustrating, I thought I was going to just be able to make calls and do it, and evidently I'm not really. I had to learn a new way, really, and I'm still trying to figure that out. And so this is really just me fleshing out some ideas of what I'm trying. These may or may not work for you, but I think if you try them on, I think they work. I think the trick is trying to figure out how to actually put them into practice. So that first little paragraph there, I have this handout just so that we can all follow along, and so that if any of this is memorable, you can take it with you. So under the introduction, it says, there's a myth in leadership that says, until I'm in charge, I cannot lead. When I am in charge, then I will lead. Too often, we mistake our organizational position with our leadership ability, or really opportunity. However, if leadership is influence, John Maxwell calls leadership influence. I think that's probably the best definition of leadership. All of us have influence. A hallmark of our organization is pushing leadership to the lowest level possible, because we are convinced that everyone is a leader who can and should lead, even when they're not in charge. So this is the first thing I'm trying to do, is lead me. And the little blank next to lead, that's a blank. The word there is me, if you want to follow along. Lead me. There's been so much written about self-leadership, but self-leadership really is, it's the most powerful tool of leadership that every single one of us, no matter what position you are in your organization, every single one of us ought to figure out what we're doing to lead ourselves. The great thing about leading yourself well, as the first blank says, no one can lead me better than I'm leading myself. If you lead yourself well, then you will be well led. You will ensure that you're well led. And so every single one of us needs to figure out, what am I doing to lead myself? The way it works in church world, so you can just contextualize this example however you would like, but what happens in our world is there is a desire for spiritual depth that some people have. And so they'll come up to me, typically in our atrium, and they'll say, hey, I'm frustrated. And I'll say, okay, let's talk. What's going on? And they'll say, we're not going deep enough. And I'm like, well, you rise and fall in your definitions, so tell me what you mean by deep. And they'll say, well, I really want to do a deep dive through the Old Testament, okay? I don't know if you've ever tried to read the Old Testament. It's thick, y'all. Like, it's serious. It sometimes feels like you need some sort of master's level education to understand some of it. And so I understand what they're saying a little bit. I'm like, okay. And so what I do is I often push back. I'll say, hey, well, let me ask you a question. Are you reading the Old Testament for yourself? And they get offended. Like, they step back. They're like, how dare you question me? Like, I'm bringing you the question. And they'll say, no, I'm not. What does that have to do with anything? And I'm like, well, it has everything to do with anything. Because if you're not willing to read the Old Testament yourself, then how is anybody going to try to walk you through a deep dive? And I feel like it's honestly, so much has been written about the millennial generation, but millennials sometimes get attached with this stereotype that they're frustrated because somebody's not pouring into them. I don't have a leader that's pouring into me, that's leading me well. If you have a boss right now that you're frustrated with, which is usually the case. If you have a boss, you probably have some kind of frustration with your boss. Chances are you feel like your boss is not leading you well enough. And maybe sometimes we use that as an excuse. Why aren't you growing as a leader? Well, because my boss is not leading me well, as if it's his fault or her fault. But the truth is, if we lead ourselves well, then we honestly If we have a great boss, fantastic. If we don't, then we can still be led well. I'm convinced of this, and I would imagine you are too. Letter B says, when I wait to be led, I reduce my influence and I lose my opportunity to lead. I reduce my influence and I lose my opportunity to lead. I really believe that every one of us has a measure of influence. I think you have a measure of influence inside of you, and when you sit back and wait, whether it's because you're frustrated or not, whether somebody has, you feel like robbed you of authority or responsibility that you have been given, no matter what the excuse is, when we sit back and wait, whether through frustration or not, whether it's legitimate or not, I think we actually reduce the influence that's in us. We lose this opportunity that we have. Every moment is an opportunity for us to step up and to lead. And when we sit back and wait, then we lose those moments. And when I look back over my short career, that's one of my greatest frustrations, is that I felt like I was waiting too long. I thought, okay, well, I'm just going to wait until I get to be in charge. Like once I get to be the one in front, once I get to be the one at the top, then I'll be able to lead. And the truth is, if we lead ourselves well, then you don't have to wait. You don't have to wait until you get into that position that you're longing for or waiting for. Letter C says this right here, leading myself requires modeling followership. Modeling followership. Number 2, monitoring my heart and my behavior. Monitoring my heart and my behavior and making a plan. So modeling followership, I don't know if followership is a word or not, but I think it makes sense. It makes sense to me. Following someone is important no matter who you are, no matter where you are in the organization, but it's more than just choosing to follow someone. It's something that needs to be modeled. The people around us need to see that we're actually following someone. Oftentimes I have found, when I get real frustrated with my boss and I'm at the water cooler in the coffee shop break room that only amazing companies like this have. That's incredibly swanky. When I'm sitting around there and I'm griping, I'm frustrated, I'm mad about what I'm not getting to do or what somebody is keeping me from being able to do, the real challenge is not just what's going on inside of me, but that I'm not modeling followership. And I think modeling it is as important as actually doing it. The people around you need to see that you are following someone. The person that you work for needs to know that you're behind him or behind her. And one of the ways we do that is by monitoring our heart, monitoring our behaviors. So what is easier to monitor, your heart or your behaviors? I don't know the answer. I'm just asking. What's that? Behavior. I think it's easier because it's at least visible, because there's a tangible aspect to it. You can at least see it. You could write it down. You could explain it to someone. No one really knows what's going on in your heart. You know, this is a little bit of one of those squishy things to even talk about. What is the heart? What is the soul? Meatloaf talked a lot about heart in some of the songs that he wrote, but it's hard to really understand. But it's that part of us that contains all of our emotions and all of our feelings and our thoughts and our desires and our motives. Our behaviors are a little easier to monitor. You can ask someone about your behaviors. If you haven't asked anyone around you, what is it like to be on the other side of me, you should ask them that. If you haven't asked your boss recently, hey, if you were me, what would you do differently? You should ask them that. Because he probably has an answer. She probably has an answer. One of the most challenging things, I would imagine we would all agree, one of the most challenging things about managing people is when you have some constructive thought to offer, but you don't know how to say it, because you're kind of walking on eggshells, you're trying to figure out how to deliver the feedback. One of the interesting things about feedback, all of us want feedback, none of us like feedback, right? And that's been statistically proven. Majority of people desire feedback. No one likes to receive it though, right? Why not? Well, because it feels like rejection. When I get feedback from you, I feel like you're rejecting me. And so somehow, some way, we've got to push ourselves past the acceptance or rejection that we feel like we're actually getting to go and receive it, to go and ask for it, to say, hey, what is it like to be on the other side of me? What would you do differently if you were in my spot? And by doing that, we can actually monitor our behaviors. We can know what's really happening. Well, your boss's job is not to monitor your behaviors. My boss's job is not to monitor my behavior. That's part of leading myself. That's my responsibility. And more difficult than that is monitoring our heart, monitoring our motives, monitoring our jealousy and our frustration and what we're angry at and what we're worried about and what we're fearful of, because that ultimately is what's going to inform our behaviors. And so learning how to monitor those things is, I think, one of the most challenging aspects of leading yourself well. But if you do that, then you can be led well. And it doesn't matter whether you're frustrated about being in charge or not. You can actually be led well. And then the last one is making a plan. I don't know what your plan is right now. I mean, I would imagine if you're probably challenging your teams to have a plan. If you manage a team right now and somebody on the team said, I'm not really doing anything to lead myself right now, that would probably frustrate you. You want them to be reading something, meeting with something, getting some kind of degree, getting some kind of education, trying to continue to grow. But in the same way, we need a plan as well. So I ask our teams to to have an elevator pitch at all times. What are you doing to lead yourself well? What's your plan? And it could be I'm reading Lencioni's latest book. That could be your plan for leading yourself. It could be I'm meeting with a coach. I'm meeting with a counselor. I'm trying to work out more. I'm trying to read more. It could be I'm trying to stop my Netflix binging. I don't know what it would be. Or maybe start your Netflix binging. Maybe it's like real educational documentaries that you learn from. I'm not saying it's all bad. What I'm saying is that we all need a plan. And I think the easier our plan is to communicate, I think the more effective it actually is for ourselves. Letter D says this. This is just the intangible benefits for being led well. You will become the easiest to lead. You will become the easiest to lead. You will become the most desired to be led. And you will become the quickest to lead next. So the easiest to lead, the most desired to be led, and the quickest to lead next. People that lead themselves well are not always easy to lead, particularly with an insecure defensive leader. An insecure defensive leader who has someone on his or her team who is leading himself or leading herself well will actually be challenged by that person because they'll be bumping up against their leadership. You've probably felt that before. You probably work for someone. I would imagine the fact that you're here means that you're probably a person that's trying to learn, trying to grow, trying to get better, and you've probably worked for someone that you've bumped up against and they've been you frustrated them because of your growth, and potentially they frustrated you because of their jealousy, defensiveness, insecurity, whatever it is. But I'm just personally, for people on our team, I love the ones that are challenging themselves and leading themselves well. Why? Because it's easier to steer a racehorse than to carry a racehorse, right? People on your team that you're trying to just get them moving, get off the couch and do something. That's really hard to do. I would much rather course correct someone who's trying to move along than somebody who's not doing anything. So I think they are the easiest to be led. Most desired, you'll be fought over. People in our organization that are leading themselves well are typically people that multiple departments and campuses and organizations end up fighting over. And I think ultimately it's the route for more influence. It really is the route for more authority when you lead yourself well. I love this quote by Tom Watson, not the golfer, but the CEO of IBM from the mid-20th century. And ladies, let me just say too, this is before the day when we were careful about our pronouns, and so just change these pronouns to female pronouns if that's the case for you. But nothing so conclusively proves a man's ability to lead others as what he does from day to day to lead himself. Nothing so conclusively proves a woman's ability to lead others as what she does from day to day to lead herself. So if you want to prove your ability to lead more, the greatest practice field, the greatest opportunity is to lead yourself well. So if you flip the page over, here's two more big behaviors. One, lead me. Two, choose positivity. Choose positivity. Now, how many of you, you would just say you have a rather positive personality? Yeah, it's typically about half the room, and you're probably married to someone who doesn't. It's the way it works out. It's amazing how we just pair up with each other. So what do you call someone who doesn't have a positive personality?
Negative.
Yeah, I have found that it's not actually negative, it's realistic. At least that's what people who seem to lean more negative say, because they would never say that they're negative. They would say, negative, I'm not negative, I'm just realistic, okay? So an example would be, we have 4 little kids, 7, 5, 3, 1. Yes, we know how that happens. And we don't really go to restaurants, quite honestly. So my wife is just like, look, if you want to take them to a restaurant, go for it. That's on you, but I know what's going to happen. We're going to order some food that we're going to pay for it. No one's going to eat it. Someone's going to fall apart. I'm going to be slightly embarrassed. I'm going to be upset. I'm going to lose my temper. You're going to yell. We're going to get in the car, and it's going to be a complete mess. And I'm like, I don't see it going that way, you know? She's like, well, then go for it. So I'll take them by myself, and then naturally that's what happens. But and I'll say, sometimes I'll even say, don't be so negative. And she's like, I'm not negative, I'm just being realistic. That's what happens. So I do agree that most people either have a rather positive or maybe a more realistic personality. But if you lean more positive, then maybe for you this comes more naturally. If you find yourself to be maybe a little bit more cynical, you would say maybe a little bit more realistic. I really believe this is a choice. I think there is a choice that we have with the attitude that we bring every day to work. I would imagine these are things that you tell the people in your organization as well. Letter A, the greatest benefit I I bring my team is not my talents, gifts, experience, or education, though they are massive, my team would tell you. But the greatest thing I bring, I'm kidding, the greatest thing I bring my team is my energy. In our organization, we want 100-watt bulbs. I don't want 40-watt bulbs. I want people whose hair is on fire who are wanting to help someone make their life better. Those are the kinds of people that we are attracted to. We want to be an organization filled with people that bring energy. Why? Because you have the potential. I just Wednesday did this talk for a new group of interns at our church. They're brand new. There's about 25 of them. And I said, look, you have the power as an intern to change the dynamic of the team that you're working on. I genuinely believe that. And it's not going to be because somebody's impressed with your ideas. It's not going to be because somebody's impressed with your intellect or your education or your experience. It's going to be because of the energy that you bring every single day, and that's a choice that every one of us has to make. This is why, though, it's so important when we're not in charge to bring this powerful kind of energy. Because letter B, positivity is a fight for we over me. Positivity is a fight for we over me. Do you remember the birds from Finding Nemo? Any of you that have kids that only watch Disney movies? Yeah, they just fly around screaming, mine, 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 mine. Disney is not known for their theologically astute stances that they take with their movies, but I would propose to you that this is one of the most theologically sound proposals that Disney has ever made. Because this is such the condition of the human race, that we come out of the womb screaming, mine, 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 mine. Every human really is screaming mine. Like, what is mine? Kid Rock is like, I got to get mine. Like, everybody's thinking about how I can make life revolve around me. In the play that is your life, in the theater of your world, who's the star? Well, it's not someone else. It's you. Every single one of us, we operate that way. In my life, in my world, the way I see the world, I am naturally the star of the show. And you are too. Some of you are like, well, I don't really like attention. Well, even that, you're trying to design your world so that you don't get the attention that maybe you would rather not have. But positivity, what it does, I have found, is instead of you trying to find your own way and do your own thing and be your own, not just your own person, but to make your own way, positivity really is a fight to say, hey, there's 100 ways to skin a cat. And there's a bunch of different ways to run an organization. There's a bunch of different ways to make money. There's a bunch of different ways to organize business. But the most powerful way is to pick a way and then get everybody behind that way. That's the way it works. I've seen dozens and dozens of churches that I wouldn't necessarily go to, and I would be like, I don't know why you're doing it that way. It seems like that's broken, that's weird, but it's working. And what I found is that what's actually working is not the idea of what they're doing, but that they have everyone behind the idea that they've chosen. And you know that to be true for your organization as well. And what positivity is positivity is fighting to say, hey, we're going to be about we and not just about me. Because you can't get as much done if it's just about me. If it's about we, you can really change the world. Right? I mean, that's happened before. Letter C, when I'm not a part of the decision-making process, my default is to abdicate leadership. When I'm not a part of the decision-making process, my default is to abdicate leadership. So we have offices that, we have conference rooms that look similar to this as well, where there's glass conference rooms. And I used to think that the higher I grew in the organization, the less my feelings would be hurt when I saw a meeting that I wasn't invited to. Have you ever noticed this? The truth is, though, now I get more offended when I didn't get invited to a meeting. Because I'm like, really? Like, you were going to have that meeting about that? Because you naturally can do the math about what the meeting's about by who's not in there, right? Or who is in there. And so I'll get my feelings hurt and think, gosh, why did they not invite me? Did they not want me to be a part of this meeting? And what typically happens is I just sit back and I go, well, then fine. Like, if whatever happened in there, I guess they didn't want the best ideas because they didn't invite me to the meeting. If they wanted the best ideas, they would have invited me there. But clearly they didn't. And what naturally happens, you know this to be true, but they make a decision, and that decision gets handed to you. And you have to execute the decision that they just made. How frustrating is that? You're having to execute something that you didn't even get to speak into. Dave Ramsey, in EntreLeadership, Dave says, he says, when you allow people to weigh in, they're more likely to buy in. You believe that's true? Yeah, I do too, of course. When you give people the opportunity to weigh in, they're more likely to buy in. Oh, that's great. That works when you can fit your staff meeting in your car, right? But I would imagine you work in a place where you can't. I mean, naturally, the way we organize is we give certain people teams and responsibilities, and we say, hey, this is what you're responsible for, and this is what you're responsible for, and this is what you're responsible for. And we're at a size now where everyone doesn't get to speak into every idea. As sad as that is, as hard as that is, I don't get to speak into every idea. I don't get to speak into every decision. I get decisions handed to me that I didn't make. So if I could talk to Dave, I would want to know, Dave, well, what do you do? What do you do when you need people to buy into ideas they didn't get to weigh in on? Because you're probably right now having to buy into a decision that you didn't get to weigh in on. And what typically happens when we're not in charge is oftentimes we'll just sit back and we'll go, well, that's a dumb idea. And with our attitude, we have the opportunity to make that either fly or fail. Right? Because it's really not about how great the idea is, it's about getting everybody behind the idea. And so what I have found is that when you're not in charge, letter D says, more important than making the right decision is owning the decision and making it right. More important than making the right decision is owning the decision and making it right. That the attitude you bring to the decision that you didn't make but you're being asked to execute is going to make all the difference in the world about whether or not the idea works or not. And when you're not in charge, the tendency is to abdicate, is to go, well, they didn't want the best idea. Because if they did, they would have asked me. But they wanted to have their little meeting, and so they had it, and then they came up with the theme or the thing or the process or the strategy, and now they're handing it to me and asking me to handle it. Well, it's dumb. It doesn't work. It's a stupid idea. And that's naturally what we do. And so we just sit back and we abdicate, or we sit on our hands and we think, well, I can't do anything about this. I can't do anything about it. The idea sucks. Like if it didn't suck so bad, then maybe it would work, but it's just terrible. And that's what we naturally do. But instead of saying, you know what, I didn't make the decision, I might have chosen a different decision. But what matters more than making the right decision is owning the decision and making it right. That you really can't make any decision work if you choose to work the decision. And that really is, it's what you want people that work for you, it's how you want them to handle themselves. And I think in the same way, the people that we work for probably want us to handle ourselves that way, because it really is the best way to handle things, particularly when you're not in charge. Letter E says this, in a complex, multi-tiered, multi-level organization, there's always a choice between two perspectives. I'm frustrated at what I'm not getting to be a part of, so it's walking by the meeting going, I'm frustrated, I didn't get to be in there. Or, I'm grateful for what they do for me, there's always a they. I'm grateful for what they do for me because it frees me to do what only I can do, what I get to do. And every day you have that choice. You have the choice between walking past the meeting, going, I'm frustrated that I didn't get to be in the meeting. I'm frustrated that I'm not at a certain level. I'm frustrated that I'm not being given more seniority or more authority. Or you can say, you know what? I'm in the spot I'm in. They're making decisions that I don't have to make. And so I'm just grateful. I'm going to choose to be grateful that I'm getting to do what I can do. And they've freed me up to be able to do that. This little box says, are you a wind in someone's sail, or are you a wind against someone's sail? Your boss feels you. You know this, right? I mean, your boss has a feeling about you. Boston says we're more than a feeling. We are more than a feeling, but we're also particularly a feeling. You know how I know that? Because the other day, the strangest thing happened. My cell phone rang, which I'm like, who does that anymore? And a name popped up. I was like, text me, please. Like, do not call me. And for the love, don't leave me a voicemail. But whatever. That's my own soapbox. But the name popped up, and it's somebody that works for me. And what's that?
I said, if you're over 50,
if you're over 50, you're like, yeah, I want to have a phone call. Well, don't. Just send them a text and say, hey, call me when you get a chance, you know. It's just grace. Just show grace to each generation. So I see a name pop up, and it's somebody who works for me, and I immediately got this feeling. And so I sent him to a voicemail, you know. So you probably have somebody like that works for you. But honestly, it dawned on me in that moment that if this person is a feeling to me, I am a feeling to my boss. That when I call my boss, he has a feeling about me as well. And we think that we don't have any influence. Sometimes we just believe the lie that we don't have any influence over the feeling that he has or the feeling that she has. And the truth is, we have a lot of influence over the feeling that we give the people that we work for when our name pops up in their inbox or on their phone. And I'm just telling you, the attitude that you bring about the decisions that are being handed to you will make that feeling a fantastic feeling, or it will cause that feeling to be I'm going to send this person to voicemail kind of feeling. And you have influence over that. And so you've got to ask the question, am I a wind in her sail, or am I a wind against her sail? And if you're mad or frustrated or angry, then you need to figure that out, because it's not going to help you in the long term. You're not going to be able to lead well if you're mad at what you're not getting to do, or frustrated at what authority you do not have. So that's about choosing positivity. Let me flip to the other side of it, not the other side of your page, the bottom next one, because this really is it's the other side of this, because sometimes I have noticed positive people are nauseating people. And I didn't know this until, honestly, I got married and I realized how naturally positive my personality is. And now that I can see it through my wife's eyes, I'm like, yeah, that's sometimes kind of gross. It's kind of annoying, that everything's always awesome. Have you seen the Lego movie? They've got that song that they sing, everything's awesome, and it's nauseating. For somebody to just walk around and go, oh, that was the greatest day of work ever, greatest meeting ever, that's the greatest product ever, best ever. In our world, it's, oh, that song was amazing, best song ever. Sunday, best service ever. This church, greatest ever. That's the way it happens in our world. And it makes me want to throw up, honestly. And someone forwarded me this email. We're doing this millennial thing at our church, and so I'm getting all these millennial research sent to me. And one of the articles said, millennial generation, are they a group of misguided optimists or rainbow puking unicorns? And I thought, that is the greatest illustration that I've ever heard. So a rainbow puking unicorn. Do you know any rainbow puking unicorns? I do. They make me want to throw. I do not enjoy being around them. They annoy me because I feel like they're like, flamingos that have just buried their head in the ground, that they're not actually rational people that are paying attention to the world, because everything's not always awesome. There's always a way that we could get better and grow. And that really is the flip side to choosing positivity. Choosing this attitude when you're not in charge is massively important, but just as important is this next one, think critically, is the skill, the ability to think critically. How would you define thinking critically? How do you define that behavior? How do you understand that behavior? What is it? What is a critical thinker?
Understanding choices and consequences.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's all about being able to make observations and then being able to connect the observations to go, oh, I see, when we change this variable, this result happens, or when someone makes that behavior, this feeling is elicited, or when this person does this, then this is the result that happens. Critical thinkers, they do three primary things, I think. They ask great questions, they make great assumptions, and they make great connections between those assumptions. That's what critical thinkers do. They ask a lot of questions. They get under the hood. They ask, why does it work this way? Why, if we changed it, what would happen? What's the result we're trying to really get? What really is the goal of this? And what could we do differently to try to get a different result? That's what critical thinkers do. And then they make assumptions. They notice things, You probably are this way. You've probably been doing this since I've been standing here. You make the one list of notes, okay, go ahead, But then you've got the side notes of like what you would do if you were in a situation like this, or what I'm wearing, or how I'm saying what I'm saying. You're just making notes, if you had something like this that Dave has at his company, what you would be doing. You're like looking at the walls, being like, that's an interesting idea, and making notes. All of us do that because naturally a lot of critical thinking happens naturally. You walk into a restaurant, you go, wonder why they don't have music playing. Like, they need music playing. If they had music playing, it'd feel way better in here. Wonder why it's so dark in here. It needs to be darker, or why is it so light? We naturally just do this. That's what critical thinkers do. And what I have found is that this attitude that I really believe that we've got to have if we want to be great leaders when we're not in charge is a choice. It really is a choice that you make. Critical thinking is not a choice, though. It's a skill. It's something that you can actually develop. You can get better at this. And if you want to be a great leader, you've got to get better at this, because it's one of the key skills to be able to lead well. But it's also, I think, one of the most important things to be able to do when you're not in charge, because you work on a team, you work for someone, and you will add more value if you can learn to think more critically. If you can learn to make more connections, to ask more questions, to be able to understand the assumptions more, to be able to understand why things are connected, you will be able to add more value to the person that you work for. So thinking critically is a incredibly important skill. Letter A, we want every leader in our organization at every level thinking about how we can make it better. I think the heart behind critical thinking is making it better. It's one of our core values as an organization, is we want to make it better. How did it go last year? It was this. Great, we're going to make it better. What was the meeting like last week? It was this. Okay, great, we're going to make it better. How have we done that in the past? Let's try to improve. Let's make it better. We want to see progress, because that's important to us, because we think, why would we not? I mean, we're here, we've got this opportunity. So let's be people that are thinking critically about how we can make it better. Critical thinking requires a switch from employee to owner. So there's, I've heard a ton of people say a lot of important things about this switch from employee to owner, but I think it is incredibly important. It's probably the most helpful thing that I did in the role that I was in is instead of thinking about the organization that I was running as someone else's organization that had been entrusted to me, it was just better for me to think about myself as an owner, to say, hey, if this were my organization, how would I operate? Not in a selfish, prideful way, but in a taking pride in it in the positive sense. That if this really were mine, I would handle this differently, probably, which I wish it wasn't that way. I wish I would handle everything the same way, but come on, let's be honest, we're people. So when you probably, if your parents gave you a car, you handle it differently than the car that you bought with your own money. It's just the way life works. So when we're owners, we just think differently. And I think critical thinking begins to happen more quickly, more actively, more consistently when we begin to think about ourselves as owners. And so whatever your job is, if you could think about it like you are the owner of this, Jim Collins calls this, in Good to Great, he wrote a little nonprofit, a little smaller book, a derivative from Good to Great. And one of the things he said was that we need to be able to create an oasis, he said a pocket of excellence, that we need to be able to create a pocket of excellence. In my house, the only place that I have to create a pocket of excellence is in the garage. So I don't really decorate things. I'm colorblind. I can't really see colors that well. And plus, I'm just naturally challenged at things that should look nice. And so my wife handles all of that. And so if I were to go and change something and move something, she'd be like, stop, just move out of the way and let me just handle this. And so I don't really have any domain in our house other than our garage. One of my favorite things to do as an industrial engineer is to pull everything out and then put it all back in. You know, it's like a game of Tetris. It's a really great Saturday afternoon for me. And I don't like when anybody messes with it. When my kids start messing with like where stuff goes, like I get annoyed because I'm like, look, this is my pocket of excellence, okay? This is like the one thing that has been entrusted to me, and I want to make it as great as possible. And you have one as well. I would imagine your frustrations about your job probably are things that are next to you or above you, probably something your boss is doing or probably what other departments are doing. The source of your frustration is probably not what's been entrusted to you. And so if that's the case, then just take everything that's in the little bubble, circle everything that's under your control, and make it as great as possible. Create a pocket of excellence. Create this area. You say, okay, you know what? I'm going to make a list of everything that I'm going to do when I'm in charge. But until then, I'm going to take what I am responsible for, and I'm going to make it better. I'm going to treat it like I own it, like this is mine. And I think if you do, you will learn to think more critically, you'll gain more skills, but you'll also get more practice for when there's more authority given to you. Letter C says this, by being fully present in relationships and environments, critical thinkers have a high with-it factor. They have a high with-it factor. The reason why I use that phrase, I heard Colin Cowherd talk about NFL quarterbacks, and he said that if you notice, most of the big colleges, you know, the perennial football powerhouses, Alabama, USC, Michigan, Notre Dame, they don't send a lot of quarterbacks to the NFL. Most of the starting quarterbacks in the NFL right now are from small colleges, which is a very interesting observation. Colin Cowherd is actually a very good critical thinker. And one of his assessments is that when you go to a small school, you play with a chip on your shoulder because you're kind of frustrated that nobody recruited you. And you also learn some skills that you wouldn't normally learn. Like Ben Roethlisberger played at Miami of Ohio. Miami of Ohio is not known for their football, okay? They're known for their high ratio of women to men. At least that's what I know about them. And Ben Roethlisberger had to learn how to navigate a broken pocket because he was playing with these two-star offensive linemen. And now, as an NFL quarterback, that's one of his gifts, is he's very good at, even at his size, of maneuvering traffic and trouble and problems. And somehow, some way, these small college quarterbacks just have this with-it factor. They have this ability to be present, not just in football, but what Colin Cowherd's assessment is, even when he's with them outside of this, they're just present. They have this, even a relational presence. And I think that critical thinkers have this. You know this, like you can pick it up in an interview usually. Somebody who's just present, they're with you, they're paying attention, they're picking up on things, they're making connections between things. I think it's just one of the powerful makeups of a critical thinker is just to be with it, to be present, to be understanding what's going on. Letter D, thinking critically is a skill, being critical is a snare. So this is what's, to me, dangerous about critical thinking. The line between thinking critical and being critical is razor thin. Have you ever noticed this? That it's very easy to drift from, I'm trying to think critically, to now all of a sudden I have become a cynical, skeptical, critical person. That's toxic for a team and toxic for an organization. So how do you resist being a critical, being a person who is critical? What's the difference in your mind between somebody who's just being critical and someone who has the skill of critical thinking?
Your motivation.
I think it is, yeah. Zane, I totally agree with you. I'm Clay, by the way.
Hey, sorry I was late, brother.
No problem. We're moderately offended, but we will move.
Do what I did.
Okay, well, don't get mad at yourself. So keep it positive. I think it is the motivation. Yeah, I think it is the motivation too. I think what I have found is that. Have you ever noticed when you're looking at another department or looking at another team or even looking at your boss or somebody in another organization, it's real easy sometimes to get that feeling that creeps in of I kind of want them to lose. I hope great things don't happen to them. Some of you might be thinking, yeah, you're in ministry, you're not supposed to have thoughts like this. Okay, well, I'm a human, so this happens to me. I'll see other campuses and I can feel it sometimes. The competition, I want to win, I want to be better, I want to be seen as great. And so sometimes it creates in me this negative attribute where I just get critical about them and I want them to lose. And I think the motive behind most people who are critical is I want bad things to happen to this person. We might not say it, but we kind of internally celebrate their misfortune. You know, that's like the modern day version of revenge, is we just internally celebrate when bad things happen to them. And I think that being critical, that's one of the greatest dangers of it, is that you just naturally want the people around you not to win. Critical thinkers, though, they want others to win. You know, they look at other teams, they look at other departments, they go, hey, I want you to win. And I have an idea that I think would make what you're doing better. And you can have the credit. I don't need the credit. You got it. It's yours. Don't tell anybody else said it. And especially if it's a bad idea. But if it works, go for it. It's all yours. That's what people who are thinking critically can do. They can maintain a desire for the other person to win. And if you can do that, I think you can become this synergistic, powerful leader, whether you're in charge or not. If you choose positivity and learn to think critically, it's a powerful combination. Because most people that are just positive, they're not using their mind to think about how to make something better. And then the danger of always trying to make something better is that you naturally just get critical and you lose that attitude that is going to make or break your job anyway. So this little box here on the top of the back says, the clipboard is for giving a grade, the towel is for lending a hand. The clipboard is for giving a grade, the towel is for lending a hand. Here's what I mean by this. We have a multi-campus organization. We have the central organization. Every single week, somebody from our central organization comes to observe what's going on. And I can feel it. It's amazing. I'll be standing on stage saying, hello to everybody, welcome everybody, and I can feel when they're in the back of the room. And they don't literally carry clipboards, but it feels to me like they are. Do you have a boss this way, or do you have other people that you work around that it just feels like they're walking around grading you, you know? Decent, C. Wow, I wouldn't have done it that way, D. Oh, that was actually pretty good. Like, people seemed engaged. I'll give that a B, you know? I understand that we've got people with all kinds of worldviews in here. I think Jesus was more than a great leader, but he was a great leader. And one of the things that Jesus did as we observe his life is he did not carry a clipboard. He did not grade his closest followers. We never see him going, Peter, like, decent fishing, I'll give you a C. Like, he didn't do that. No, actually, the image that is most closely associated to Jesus towards the end of his life is he gathers his team together and he actually gets down on a knee and says, I'm not going to grade you. I'm actually going to wash your feet. I'm going to serve you. I'm here to actually make your life better. I'm here to actually help you. I think that's what great leaders do. I think great leaders get down on a knee, they put the clipboard down, and they pick up the towel, and they say, hey, how can I help you? That's what critical thinking is. Critical thinking is saying, I want to think as hard as I can, as much as my little mind can work, to try to figure out how can I make your life better. In regards to your boss, instead of grading your boss, how would your job change if you put the clipboard down and picked up a towel and said, I'm not here to grade you, I'm here to help you. What can I do to help you? Is there anything I can do to help make your life better? That's what critical thinkers, when we're operating at our best, that's what we do. And so if we can learn to lead me, choose positivity, and think critically, I think we can really begin to lead when we're not in charge. So I think we just have a few minutes left. I want to run through this last point really, really quickly, but this one is really important to me. They're all important to me, but this one is maybe the most challenging to me. The number 4 says reject passivity. Reject passivity. I have found that One of the, in the same way you catch a cold, you didn't do anything to step into it, you just caught it, it kind of caught you. I have learned that passivity catches me. When I'm at my worst and I'm frustrated about what I'm not getting to do and I'm mad because my boss this or our central organization, they won't get this to me in time or it's not good enough or I'm not handling, I get passive and I sit back and I wait, and it really does catch me. It catches up with me. It's something that I think it maybe is the most tempting posture for someone who's not in charge to be in, is just to be a passive leader. And I think passive leaders are dangerous because sometimes it can look good. We can even do it, especially in church world. We can do it out of humility, out of honor. But honestly, passive leaders don't get anything done. And you will not passively find anything that you're not intentionally pursuing. We don't just back into being a great leader. You have to intentionally go find this. And so I think this is one of the most dangerous things that you and I can catch. Letter A, at every level in our organization, there's information, experience, perspective that shapes our direction, So this is what I told our interns the other day. I said, look, you're going to want to be passive because you're an intern. And some of that's good, and there's some emotional intelligence involved with that. I don't want you running into everything trying to take over because you are an intern, so you should be aware of that. But I also want you to resist being passive because you have a perspective that could shape this organization. You have an idea, you have experience, you have a life. For one thing, you are number one of you. And so you've got this unique perspective that if you brought it every single day, it could help shape our organization. So do not be passive. So for every single one of it, no matter what your spot is, I don't care how frustrated you are, maybe the frustration you have is the thing that could unlock the next growth for your organization. So wherever you are, don't sit back and be passive with it, but allow it to motivate you and move you on. Letter B, the lie is this: when I'm in the leader's seat, I'll have influence. Instead, influence needs to be cultivated wherever you are. The lie is that when I'm in the leader's seat, when I have the authority, then I'll have influence. Instead, influence needs to be cultivated wherever you are. Here's what I mean by this. In 2001, 2002, the state of Georgia elected a new governor. It's the first Republican governor since the 19th century. It's amazing. The Democratic Party had been in the governor's seat for 100 and something years. I needed an easy A at Georgia Tech. Those are hard to find, and my GPA desperately called for one. And so I found out about this internship. If I interned at the state capitol, I could get this easy A. And so I'm not beyond begging, and so I did, and I got this job actually in the governor's office. Brand new governor, everything had just changed over. And I got this desk that was perfectly located because it was right next to the conference room in the policy group. As an intern, you probably had a job like this at some point. My job was to get coffee, make copies, and clean out closets. That's typically that's where we all start. And so that's where I was. And but it was great because I was right next to this room and I could hear everything they were discussing. And the governor was often in and out of there, and they were talking about transportation, or they were talking about the budget, or they were talking about education. This one particular day, I will never forget this moment. I could hear voices in the room start getting louder, and I could tell there was a conflict going on. And then next thing you know, I hear this. Somebody's banging the table. That's not a very good bang, but it was like a big bellowing, big loud bang. And I hear this booming voice say, "I am the governor of the state of Georgia." Now, I was 22. I had never read a leadership book. I'd never been to a conference on leadership. I didn't really even know the word or the term leadership. I just knew that's not good leadership. I remember thinking to myself, if you're having to do that, something's not going right, Because what was the governor doing in that moment? The governor was showing everyone that he had the gun. You know what I mean? He was letting everyone know, I have the gun. I am in charge, I have authority, and therefore I have the gun. And if you do not do what I'm asking you to do, I will use it. That's what he was letting everyone know. Does the gun work as a leadership tactic? It does for the short term, right? I mean, if somebody came to your office, God forbid, today and said, you better do this or else I'm going to fire you, would you do it? Well, I mean, probably, right? I mean, I would. If my boss came to me today, he called me right now, and was like, get back here, I'd be like, all right, you got it. I wouldn't do that for long, though, right? I mean, the gun doesn't work in the long term. I mean, no one wants to be in an environment where the one who is in charge is always leveraging the gun. The reason why I say that is because what you're doing right now matters. It matters deeply. Even if you hate what you're doing, it matters deeply. Because what you're learning to do right now, when you're not in charge, you're not the key leader in your organization, maybe you're not the most senior leader in your organization, maybe it's not your deal and you're waiting someday where you can start your own or get put in place to be able to run your own. What you're doing now has a huge influence on what you will do then. And if you can learn now to leverage influence, then when you get into the senior seat of authority, then you will have influence to be able to use. And when I heard the banging on the table, I didn't make this connection when I was 22, but as I've looked back on it, I realized the reason why he was having to do that is because somewhere before this moment, he had missed an opportunity to learn how to cultivate influence. See, what great leaders do, great leaders sit in a room full of people that they manage, people they don't manage, and they move the room. You know, they get everybody to go in a certain direction. And how do they do that? They do it through influence. They do it through relationship. They do it through, I'm going to go first. I'm going to eat last. I'm going to make sure that everybody wins by doing this. That's what leaders do. That's what great leaders do. And if you got to pull the gun out and say, I don't care if you like it or not, we're moving this way, you've somehow, in your past, you missed an opportunity to learn how to cultivate influence. And if you can learn to do that right now, wherever you are, even if you're angry, if you're frustrated, if you're mad, if you feel like your job's a waste of time, if you hate your organization, if you hate your role, it doesn't matter. What you're doing still matters. Because if you can learn to cultivate influence now, you will have it. You will have accrued it. And when you get to be in charge, you can use it, which is a better way to lead anyway. Because as I said at the very beginning, the trick is great leaders don't use their authority anyway, even when they have it. Great leaders use influence. And the way you know how to do that is by cultivating it when you don't have it. Is by cultivating it when you're not in charge. So what you're doing now, I don't know you, we've never met, but I'm just telling you, what you're doing now, it matters. It matters for your future. And so you've got to learn now, how can I cultivate influence with the people I'm around to be able to be a person that moves the room, that has the ability to shape the direction of where we're headed without the authority to do that. It's a challenge. It's really challenging to do that, but you can do it. The little box there says, when there's something to blame, there's nothing to work on. Passive people blame people. When you're passive and you sit back and somebody says, why aren't you doing what you need to be doing? We blame, say, well, he's not or she's not or they're not. When you blame, you miss out on whatever it is for you to work on. And so instead of being passive, then take some intention and say, I'm going to pick this up. Is anybody handling this? No, I'm going to handle it. And instead of just blaming, then just be busy. Get busy. Find things that you can do. Letter C says, when I'm only waiting for someone to hand me something, I have the potential to become someone who will not be handed anything. Have you ever had somebody who worked for you? I had this at my most recent job. I had a guy who was in charge of a lot, important leader. I really needed him to lead well. And every time we met, he would say, hey man, I really don't have a lot going on right now. If you have anything you need me to do, let me know. And I knew his spirit. His spirit was, it was good. It was positive. He was trying to be helpful and trying to be honoring. But it drove me crazy because I would always sit back and in my mind I would go, hey, I'm now having to do my job, which I got to do, but now I'm also having to do your job because part of your job is to figure out what you need to do. I don't know what you need to do. I'm not in your job. I know that I manage you, but I can't see what you see. I'm not in proximity to what you're in proximity of. So you see what you need to do, and you figure that out. And sometimes when we just sit back and say, hey, let me know if you need anything, we quickly become someone who will not be handed anything. So if you're in a position right now where you don't feel like you have a lot going on or you feel like they haven't given you enough authority or responsibility, go find something to pick up. Go find something you say, hey, this needs to get better. That's what critical thinking is. It's finding, okay, if we change this, maybe this would help. And going, okay, I'm going to pick this up. Is anybody working on this? No? Okay, well, I'm going to handle it. And you guys let me know if you need anything else. Because in our organization, the people that get called on most are typically the busiest people anyway. Isn't that true? The people that you trust the most are the ones that have a lot going on anyway. And so passivity really, there's no win in it. There's no win in sitting back and going, well, I'm not in charge and I'm just mad and frustrated. It really doesn't help. It won't help you. It doesn't help the organization. It doesn't help your boss. And it definitely will not help your future. Letter D, this is the last thing. Learn to reject passivity while under authority, and you will become a leader worthy of authority. Worthy of authority, if you can learn to reject it. So I don't know if there's one of those that sticks out more than the other, that maybe you need to figure out how to lead yourself better. Maybe you need to figure out how to choose more positivity. Maybe you need to figure out how to be a better critical thinker. Maybe you need to figure out how to reject passivity. Maybe it's something else. But I would just say this, that if you could learn to lead when you're not in charge, you will be a great leader. Great leaders can lead when they have the authority and when they don't. I mean, think about all the greatest things that have happened in our world. Dr. King, he didn't have a title, and he changed the world through influence. You look at what Nelson Mandela did in South Africa. He didn't have authority, he didn't have a title, and he changed a nation through influence. Pick your person. There's a lot of great presidents who have done a lot of great things. But what's even more impressive are the people that didn't have the title, they didn't have the authority, and yet they still leveraged influence to make something better. So you and I really believe that we can do that as well. So that's it for me. Thanks for having me. Dave, you...
Do you have any
Hey, Brooke.
suggestions on how to get rid of the clipboard?
Well, the clipboard is an attitude. So, yeah, I mean, it's a posture.
Shift that attitude, like maybe accepting less than perfection, or I mean, that's kind of what came to mind.
I don't really like that because I don't want less than perfection. I want things great.
Right.
I think it's coming along beside people, you know, instead of trying to be out in front, instead of getting behind people, it's coming right next to them and saying, hey, it's the posture of I want to put my arm around you and I want to walk with you. The challenge is when they still don't get it. And we're an organization that is not afraid to fire people, which I don't know how firing people is for you. We call it freeing their future. But in church world, it's hard to fire people because you want them to go to your church after they're done. That's weird. I wouldn't imagine. I mean, you don't care if they use your products or not once they're done. But so it's a real challenge. But sometimes the answer is we need to free your future and find you a better place. So I don't know that I would dumb down the excellence or to accept less, and I know what you're saying, but I really think it's coming along next to someone and say, hey, I want to help you. And so questions are our greatest tactic. I feel like we lead way less than we should with questions. I feel like too often we lead with statements and trying to really get inside of someone, help them to discover why getting better would help them win, and of course it would help us win. I think that's what I would say. But does anybody else have a thought on what you would do to put the clipboard down?
You know, when you ask the difference between clipboard and towel, critical thinking versus being critical, the difference is love. Period.
Yes, it is.
Now,
Which is a motive. Yeah, I don't think you can lead people well if you don't love them well. I mean, I have found that. I don't think you can follow someone well that you don't love. And we're, again, getting into like gooey stuff that maybe if you're not a person of faith, maybe this is, I don't know, different for you. But for me, what is your name? Derek, I totally agree with you. I think that for me, it's something I have to pray about. I have to say, God, would you help me love the person that I'm trying to lead? Because I can't lead them well if I don't love them. And particularly with my boss. I mean, I've had multiple bosses over the years, as I'm sure you have, and some are better than others and easier to work for than others. And I worked for one for about 10 years that drove me bananas. And the solution in the end was I got to learn to love this guy. Because if you don't love them, I agree, I don't think you can lead someone well. Any other thoughts, questions, concerns, comments, conversions?
You talked about following well at the beginning. You think your leader doesn't have some of these traits or things like that?
Yeah.
You think you just adjust yourself, or do you open up with your boss and talk to them and try to coach around that too?
Well, I think certainly in our culture we leave too quickly. So I've noticed that with younger leaders. I've seen too many younger leaders that just leave quickly. They get frustrated and they go, I'm going to go find another boss to work for. I am glad that I've had seasons of my life where I probably have left too quickly, and then I had one season where I didn't leave too quickly, and I am so glad I didn't because of what I learned. there is probably if your boss is frustrating you right now, there is probably something to be learned that you would not learn any other way. I mean, we only learn, we never change if we're never challenged. And if you're in a situation where your boss is a challenge, there's probably something for you to learn. Even if I encourage leaders to always have 2 sets of notes, to have here's what I'm doing, this is what's going on, but then here's what I'm learning, and this is what I'm going to do different when I'm in charge. Because it's an outlet, it's a better outlet for your frustration, and it creates accountability when you do get in charge and you realize how difficult leadership is. Because the truth, I think, is that every one of our bosses has a harder job than we have. We don't always realize that. We think, no, like my job's hard. My boss, I don't even know what he does. He plays golf all the time. Like, that's what he does. Like, that's way easier. The truth is, your boss's job is probably harder than your job is. My boss's job is harder than my job is. And how do I know that? Because every promotion I've gotten, the job has gotten harder. So I'm like, well, it just must work this way. So I would say don't leave too quickly. I would say try to figure out what you can learn. And then for sure, I would say learn how to challenge up. Learn how to have a hard conversation with your boss. A great way to do that is, number one, ask them when the emotions are cool, everything's good, is to say, hey, if I had something difficult to bring up, how would you like for me to do that? That's a great question to ask your boss, because it's a kind of a Switzerland question. You know, it's like everything's neutral, everything's cool right now, and it might put a little bug in their ear like, why are you asking that? You know, but nonetheless, maybe they'll say, well, you know what would be great is if you set up a meeting with me, and then we could go to lunch and talk about it. Second thing is, at the beginning of the conversation, to declare your intentions. Whenever there's communication problems, it's usually because I'm assuming something about you that you're not even really saying. This is like classic marriage advice. So usually when I'm frustrated, flip it around. Usually when my wife is frustrated at me, she's assuming something that's not even what I'm feeling, you know? I say to her, she says to me, more common, hey, are you going to cut the grass today? Like, my instinct is like, get off my back. Like, what are you talking, like, I'm like, what do you mean am I going to cut the grass today? As if I don't work all week long. And she's like, I just asked a question. Are you going to, you know, she's like, I'm just planning the day, but we just assume the motives. And so at the beginning of that tense conversation that you know is going to happen, declare your intentions and say, hey, I just want to let you know, I really, whatever you can say that's true, for me, I would say, I really like my job. I like what I get to do. I want people to grow. I want to get better. I want us to move forward. I want to help you win. I really feel like I'm here to help you win. With all that being said, because of that, I have sensed some challenge. So I have bumped into some challenges that are keeping me from being able to do what I feel like you're asking me to do, and to be able to do what I think would be best for me and for you, and that is this, and then to be able to lay them out. I mean, usually if you can start that way, it's, you know, defenses are way down. I mean, every book on crucial conversations, including the book Crucial Conversations, says that the most dangerous thing about challenging conversations is that you get into this feeling where we're not safe. I'm not safe anymore. I mean, the key attribute in a challenging conversation is that you feel safe and I feel safe, which is so weird. It's not physical harm. It's that I feel threatened. I feel like you're attacking me, or my defenses go up. And so if we can keep the emotions low and make sure that we let them know, I'm for you, I'm in this with you, I'm on your team, I'm behind you, I'm not interviewing for another job, I'm not like looking to leave. If we can keep that low, then I think you can bring whatever that challenge is. I really think that if you say it the right way, we can say anything to anyone. I mean, that's the way life works. Well, how do you know that? Well, because people have said far worse to more dysfunctional people than what you're going to say. So, yeah, I think at some point you probably need to challenge your boss today, this afternoon. Let us know how it goes. Anybody else? Yeah.
2 questions for you.
Yep.
How do you go about, when you talk about the people in your organization, to lead when they're not in charge? How do you guys go about cultivating that group in a way that isn't hierarchical, management development, that sort of stuff? How are you all doing that? Because you obviously do it really well. And my second question is, you've named some great resources and influences on leadership. Who are your favorites? Authors, teachers,
Yep.
other than your fabulous boss, Amy?
Sure. Because that's my first answer.
Yeah.
So, to your first question, I would say, I think, so when I did this talk for our staff, Andy loved it. Well, why would he not love it? I mean, this is stuff he can't say, you know? So it is, if you're, I think you're the senior leader in your organization, and by senior I mean most experienced leader. you have the most authority, not the oldest, but maybe also the oldest. We use that term senior pastor in our world, so that's a great term. But yeah, this is not a message, this is a message that comes out better from somebody who's not in charge. So I think that's one thing, is we really try to elevate voices of people who are not in charge, who have this mindset or this desire to lead well. You reward things that you want repeated, and so we really do try to give those people the microphone more. We try to listen deeply into our organization. I feel like that's my biggest challenge as a leader right now, is our church of 12,000 people on a Sunday. I mean, we have probably 30,000 people that would call North Point Community Church their church. How do I know? People will ask me, hey, how's it going at church? I have no idea. I mean, I don't know. I've got 8 people that work for me. 3 of them are doing well. 4 of them are doing okay, and 1 of them is a real challenge. That's how that's going. But so learning to listen real deeply. I mean, I read Tim Cook, an interview he did recently, and he said he sends us, I mean, I think he has 50,000 U.S. employees. You know, how in the world does he know what's going on? I mean, he's got like one stock number that is a pretty key indicator, but he says, if you want to know, send out a simple survey to your organization and ask them 2 questions. Scale of 1 to 10, how do you like your job? Number 2, what changes need to be made to improve it? So I did that with our team immediately the next day. This was about 3 weeks ago, and found a lot of issues, challenges, problems that I didn't know were there. So learning to listen, though, I think is important. If people feel like that they can't speak up, that's a real challenge to me. And so making sure that they're choosing to value health is important. I mean, that's one of the things about the advantage about Lencioni that was so great, is for him to just be able to say, hey, culture does affect your bottom line. And for the longest time we thought it didn't, but it really does. And I think you agree with that, which is why you're here. The second, I don't know, that's an answer to your question, Troy. Second thing, who am I listening to? I mean, I don't know that it would be much different than you. I mean, we read everything Lencioni does. I feel like I've read most of John Maxwell's stuff. We have been using the 4 disciplines of execution a lot lately. I listen to Tim Keller a lot in New York, just because he is doing what we're trying to do, but in a very different way. That's just for me.